I have a secret. Whenever my skin touches someone else's, I can see the person they love the most. 3 years ago, Anderson proposed to me to secure his family inheritance. The moment he slid the diamond ring onto my finger, I saw myself in his heart, wearing a wedding dress. I thought it was a mutual redemption. Until 3 years later, at a charity gala, we stood with our fingers intertwined under the spotlights. But this time, I didn't see myself. I saw a young girl in a faded white dress. In a cramped apartment, Anderson had her pinned against the wall, kissing her desperately while her eyes welled with tears. It turns out love doesn't just fade. It transfers. When he left me dying on a cold operating table for that girl, I let him go completely. Later, that arrogant man knelt in the pouring rain, begging me to touch him just one more time. But I only found him disgusting. The annual High Society Charity Gala in New York was blindingly bright with camera flashes. As the wife of Anderson Sinclair, the head of the Sinclair Group, I held his arm. We walked the red carpet, bathed in the adoration of the city's media. "Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, could you step closer and hold hands, please?" A reporter we knew called out with a smile. Anderson turned his head. A perfect, gentle warmth flickered in his deep, icy eyes. He reached out and wrapped his long, elegant fingers tightly around my palm. The moment our skin met, my heart skipped a beat. I have a secret that no one knows. Whenever I touch someone's skin, I can see the person they love deepest in their heart. 3 years ago, in this man's palm I saw myself. That was what gave me the courage to entrust my life to him. Full of anticipation, I closed my eyes, letting the sensation from my fingertips transmit his inner world into my brain. But in the next second, my blood turned to ice. The image in my mind wasn't me in a haute couture gown. It was a young girl with a ponytail, wearing a faded white dress. In a cramped, dimly lit apartment, Anderson was pinning her against a peeling wall, kissing her with wild, greedy desperation. Her eyes were red. She responded clumsily, her hands gripping his expensive, custom-made shirt. That was a side of him I had never seen. A raw, possessive, uncontrollable passion. Buzz. The phone inside Anderson's suit jacket suddenly vibrated. He let go of my hand almost instinctively. The warmth left my palm, and the cold draft rushed between my fingers. He pulled out his phone. As the screen lit up, I caught a glimpse of a text message before he could hide it on Snapchat. "Mr. Sinclair, it's pouring rain. The dorm gates are locked. I'm alone on the street, and I'm so scared. Zenda, Vivian." Anderson stared at the screen. A rare, uncontrollable flash of panic and heartache crossed his face, a face that usually never showed emotion. "I'm sorry," he said, turning to me. His voice was low but filled with undeniable urgency. "There's an emergency with our European branch. The board directors are waiting for my decision. I have to leave right now." He didn't wait for my reply, nor did he even drape his coat over my shoulders. He turned and strode down the red carpet. The camera flashes went wild, freezing me there, completely alone in front of the massive backdrop. I watched his retreating back and forced a smile that felt more painful than crying. 3 years of devotion. It turns out the deepest love in someone's heart really can transfer to someone else. I handled the media alone and returned to our sprawling, 10,000 square foot estate. Empty. Dead silent. This was the home I had built with all my heart for 3 years. Right now, it felt like a giant freezer. At 3 a.m., the beep of the smart lock echoed at the entrance. Anderson was back. He took off his damp black trench coat, handed it to the butler who hurried over, and stepped inside with his usual elegant composure. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" He walked into the living room. Seeing me sitting on the sofa, his brow furrowed slightly, his tone carrying a touch of gentle scolding. "Did you sort out the emergency in Europe?" I raised my head, looking at him quietly. "Yeah. It was a bit tricky, but it's taken care of." He walked over to me, leaning down out of habit to kiss my forehead. But as he drew closer, a completely unfamiliar scent invaded my nose. It wasn't the cedarwood cologne I had personally blended for him. It was a cheap, sickeningly sweet peach perfume. The scent of a young college girl in her early 20s. I abruptly turned my head away, avoiding his lips. Anderson froze midair. A flash of annoyance crossed his eyes, but he quickly masked it. "What's wrong?" Still mad that I left early. He straightened up and looked down at me, a hint of impatience in his voice. "Elise, you've always been sensible. You know that in my position, there are things I can't avoid." Sensible. For 3 years, to be worthy of him, I had hidden all my sharp edges. I learned to be the perfect high society wife. I thought it was mutual devotion. He just took it for granted. "I'm tired. I'm going to sleep." I stood up, not giving him another glance, and walked straight upstairs. After washing up and lying in bed, my phone screen suddenly lit up. As if possessed, I opened Anderson's Instagram. A new post stabbed my eyes. There was no photo, just a short sentence. "Even if it pours, I will hold the umbrella for you." The posting time was exactly 30 minutes after he had abandoned me on the red carpet. I bit my lip so hard I tasted copper. The man who had once sworn before a priest to protect me through sickness and disaster was now holding his umbrella over someone else. The next morning, Anderson left for the office early. In his study, I found a bidding proposal for the South Side project that he had forgotten the night before. It was a major project he had been preparing for 6 months. He needed it for a 10 a.m. meeting today. I changed into a well-tailored suit, took the document, and drove to his private penthouse. That was where he had proposed to me. He had said it was a secret base just for the two of us. Now, I wanted to see what was hidden in our secret base. The elevator went straight to the penthouse. I stood in front of the smart lock and entered my birthday. Access denied. The mechanical female voice chimed coldly. I paused, then entered the time the girl had sent the text last night. 0927. Click. The door unlocked. Immediately, I was hit by the sweet, sickening peach perfume from last night. By the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room lay a pair of white canvas shoes. And on the girl's feet were the custom Italian leather slippers I had commissioned an old craftsman to make, slippers that were supposed to belong only to me. The girl walked out of the kitchen holding a warm glass of milk. She wore an oversized white button-down shirt. The hem barely covered her thighs, and the collar was loose, revealing her pale, slender neck. The shirt belonged to Anderson. When she saw me, she gasped, almost spilling the milk. Mrs. Sinclair. She recognized me, but there was no panic of a mistress caught in the act. Instead, she had a timid, innocent look like a startled fawn. Why are you here? She asked nervously, pulling down the oversized hem to cover herself. I looked at her pure, clean face. It was exactly the same face I had seen in Anderson's heart last night. Vivian. I came to deliver a document to Anderson. I tossed the bidding proposal onto the console table, my voice completely flat. He's in the shower, Vivian whispered, biting her lower lip. The storm was too bad last night, and the dorms were locked. He was worried about me, so he let me crash here for the night. She said it so naturally, so intimately. Mrs. Sinclair, please don't misunderstand. Nothing happened. Anderson just felt bad for me trying to make it alone in New York. The more she explained, the guiltier it felt. Just then, the bathroom door opened. Anderson walked out, drying his dripping hair with a towel. He only had a towel wrapped around his waist, exposing his toned upper body. Seeing me standing in the entryway, he froze, his pupils contracting instantly. Elise? What are you doing here? He strode over. His very first instinct was to step in front of Vivian, shielding her entirely behind his back. He was protecting her, protecting his sweetheart from me. Watching his defensive stance, the last shred of my hope shattered into dust. You left your bidding document in the study. I was in the area, so I brought it over. I looked him dead in the eye, catching every micro-expression on his face. Anderson's tense jawline relaxed slightly. He let out a quiet sigh of relief. Thanks. You could have just sent a driver. He turned to look at Vivian behind him, his tone instantly returning to his usual arrogant composure. This is Vivian. She's a college student our company sponsors. She ran into some trouble last night, so I lent a hand. She's young. Don't scare her. Lent a hand. By giving her your private apartment, your personal shirt, and kissing her with a passion that looked like he wanted to merge their souls? Is that so? I curled my lips into a faint, mocking smile. Mr. Sinclair is certainly hands-on with his charity work. Anderson's face darkened. Elise cut the sarcasm. I'll wait in the car. I didn't spare the happy couple another look. I turned and walked out. 15 minutes later, Anderson got into the passenger seat. He had changed into a brand new custom suit. The faint scent of body wash had completely washed away any trace of the other woman. The silence in the car was deafening. Elise, are you angry? He reached to loosen his tie, his voice carrying a trace of exhausted indulgence. Vivian is just an innocent kid who hasn't seen the world. I treat her like a sister. As Mrs. Sinclair, you don't need to get jealous over a poor student. He always knew how to use the most dignified words to cover up his dirtiest betrayals. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Anderson. I suddenly turned, reaching out to grab his wrist tightly. Skin contact. This time, I saw it clearer than ever. In my mind, Vivian stood on her tiptoes, gently pressing her lips against Anderson's. And Anderson, eyes closed, actually let a tear slip down his cheek. In his heart, he was screaming wildly. I can't live without you. I pulled my hand back as if shocked by electricity. A wave of nausea surged in my stomach. You don't view her as a sister at all. I looked at the red light ahead, my voice so calm it terrified me. You love her. Anderson snapped his head toward me, his eyes sharp as daggers. Elise, what nonsense are you talking about? Have you been too idle lately? Now you're getting paranoid. Let's get a divorce, I said casually. The air in the car instantly froze. Screech. Anderson lunged over and slammed his foot onto the brake. The tires shrieked against the asphalt, stopping the car in the middle of the road, nearly causing a pileup. Are you crazy? His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at me. Just because I took in a sponsored student, you want a divorce? Elise, don't use divorce to threaten me. It's not funny at all. I'm not joking. I looked at his twisted, angry face. It's been 3 years, Anderson. You might not be tired of acting, but I'm tired of watching. I'll have my lawyer send the paperwork to your office tomorrow. The light turned green. I started the car again, shutting him out of my world completely. The pen in my hand was heavy, but my fingers did not tremble as I signed my name. At the bottom of the settlement agreement, Elise Vance. I did not ask for a single cent of the Sinclair Group's assets. I did not want the 10,000 square foot estate, the custom-built yachts, or the offshore trust accounts he had set up to secure our future. I wanted only what was mine, the small, historic brownstone in Brooklyn that my grandmother had left me, and my personal design studio, the Vance Atelier. When my lawyer, Mr. Cole, delivered the papers to the Sinclair headquarters, Anderson did not believe them. He called me 30 times in 2 hours. When I did not answer, he sent a single, short text message. Are you done throwing your tantrum? I have a board meeting in an hour. Stop wasting my legal team's time, Elise. Come home, and we can talk about Vivian's housing arrangements. I didn't reply. I blocked his number, directed all future communications to Mr. Cole, and spent the weekend packing my belongings. I didn't take the expensive diamond necklaces he had bought me for our anniversaries. I didn't take the designer gowns that lined the massive walk-in closet of the estate. I took only my sketchbooks, my drafting tools, and the old faded photographs of my parents. When I closed the front door of the Sinclair estate for the last time, the afternoon sun was casting long, cold shadows across the manicured lawn. The silence of the house was peaceful now, no longer suffocating. I moved into the Brooklyn brownstone. The walls were slightly drafty, and the wooden floors creaked whenever the wind blew off the East River, but it smelled of old paper, lavender, and rain. It smelled of a life that belonged entirely to me. For 3 weeks, Anderson did not show his face. I knew from the high society columns that he had officially moved Vivian into the penthouse. The media was already whispering about the mysterious young muse who was constantly seen riding in his private car, wearing simple white dresses that looked suspiciously like the ones I used to wear before I learned how to be a Sinclair. They called her his rediscovered youth. I read the articles with a detached, cold calm. I was no longer the wife, standing on the red carpet. I was just a spectator, watching the play from the cheap seats, waiting for the final curtain to fall. The medical crisis did not give me any warning. On a rainy Tuesday in late October, as I was drafting a blueprint for a new gallery space in Chelsea, a sudden, blinding pain exploded in my lower abdomen. It was a severe, acute flare-up of my chronic vascular condition, a weakness in the arterial wall that I had inherited from my mother. I collapsed onto the wooden floor of my studio, my sketchbooks scattering around me like dead leaves. My assistant, Clara, found me 10 minutes later, my face pale, my skin covered in a cold, greasy sweat. By the time the ambulance arrived, my blood pressure was dropping rapidly, the monitors in the vehicle screaming with a frantic, rhythmic warning. We need a primary relative for the emergency consent, the paramedic shouted through his radio as we sped toward Orenburg General. The patient needs an immediate arterial graft. Who is the legal proxy? Clara, trembling as she held my handbag, dialed the only number she knew, the emergency contact listed on my medical file. Anderson's private line. At that exact moment, Anderson was standing in the VIP lounge of the New York Grand Theater. Vivian had been cast as a minor dancer in the Winter Ballet, but during the dress rehearsal, she had tripped on the edge of the stage, scraping her knee and bruising her ankle. She was currently sitting on the velvet sofa, crying softly into a tissue, while 3 private doctors stood over her with ice packs and bandages. When his phone buzzed, Anderson looked at the screen. Incoming call, Orenburg General Hospital. He answered it, his brow furrowing with irritation. Yeah, Mr. Sinclair? Clara's voice came through the line, hysterical and broken. It's Elise. She's at the hospital. She collapsed at the studio. The doctors say she needs immediate surgery for a ruptured artery. They need your signature for the consent. Ethan. Vivian's voice suddenly shrieked from the sofa behind him. She had tried to stand up, but her ankle had buckled, and she fell back onto the cushions, her face pale, her eyes rolling with a sudden manic panic. My foot, it hurt so much. I think it's broken. Don't leave me, Ethan. I'm so scared. Anderson looked at his phone, then at Vivian, who was clutching her ankle, her tears falling fast. Clara, Anderson said, his voice dropping to that cool, authoritative register he used during hostile corporate takeovers. I'm in the middle of an emergency. Here. Vivian has been injured. I'll send my personal lawyer, Mr. Cole, to the hospital with the power of attorney. He should be there in 30 minutes. But Mr. Sinclair. 30 minutes is too late. Her blood pressure. Elise is strong, Anderson interrupted, his tone turning slightly impatient. She has the best doctors in the city. She'll survive 30 minutes. Vivian has. No one else. He hung up. He turned back to the sofa, scooped Vivian's small body into his arms and carried her toward his private car, his face filled with a deep, protective adoration that he didn't even try to hide. I didn't die. When the 40-minute delay had almost cost me my life, Mr. Cole finally arrived with the signed document. But by then, Clara had already taken the risk and signed the emergency waiver as my temporary proxy, allowing the chief surgeon to open me up just in time. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the sterile, fluorescent lights of the ICU were blindingly bright. The hum of the heart monitor was a slow, steady pulse beside my bed. Thump, thump, thump. I looked at my hand. The skin-to-skin touch was gone. I was wearing heavy white medical tape over my wrist where the 4 lines were inserted. But my mind was entirely clear. The door of the private ward opened. Anderson walked in. He was still wearing his custom suit, but his tie was slightly crooked. His face pale and covered in a rough, uneven stubble. He looked tired, as if he had spent the night awake, but his gray eyes were still filled with that familiar, arrogant defensiveness. Elise, he said, walking to the side of my bed. He didn't reach out to grab my hand, perhaps because he was afraid of what I would see, or perhaps because he was too proud to beg. You're awake. Cole told me the surgery went well. It did, I said. My voice was a dry, raspy whisper, but it didn't shake. I wanted to come earlier, he muttered, his fingers loosening his collar. But Vivian, her ankle was severely sprained. She had a panic attack at the clinic. I had to stay with her until she fell asleep. You had Clara and the best surgeons in the city. You knew you were safe. I know, I said. I didn't look at him with anger. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why he had left me dying on a cold operating table to comfort a girl with a scraped knee. I simply pointed a weak, trembling finger at the drawer of the bedside table. The papers, Anderson, I said. Mr. Cole brought them. They are in the blue folder. Anderson's face went entirely white. He looked at the drawer, then back at my face, his jaw clenching so hard the muscles in his cheek leapt. Are you still playing this game, Elise? He hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low rumble. You survived the surgery. You're safe. Why do you have to be so difficult? Do you really want to throw away 3 years of marriage over a sprained ankle? Sign them, Anderson, I said, closing my eyes to shut out his face. If you don't sign them today, my lawyer will file for a contested divorce on the grounds of abandonment and emotional cruelty. The medical logs from last night, the recording of your call with Clara, they are already in his possession. You recorded the call? Clara did, I said. She's a very sensible girl. Anderson stood in the silent room for a long time. Then he reached into the drawer, snatched the blue folder, and signed his name at the bottom of the settlement with a single, sharp stroke. He threw the folder onto my bed. Fine, he spat, his face twisted with a deep, furious pride. I'm signing. But don't think you can come crawling back when your little design studio fails. Elise, once you step out of this door, you are no longer a Sinclair. I've never been more relieved, I whispered. He turned on his heel and strode out of the room, the heavy wooden door closing behind him with a sharp, echoing click. The divorce was finalized in less than a month. With the Sinclair Group's name cleared of my presence, Anderson began to openly paraded Vivian through the high society circles of New York. He bought her a massive, 10-carat diamond ring. He took her to the Paris Fashion Week, bought her a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and introduced her to the city's elite as his fiancée. But the magic of the forbidden fruit does not last long once it is brought into the light. Without my quiet, elegant management of his domestic life, the Sinclair estate began to fall into chaos. The housekeepers, who had worked for the Sinclair family for 20 years, resigned one by one because they couldn't tolerate Vivian's demanding, childish tantrums. She was lazy. She didn't know how to organize a charity gala. She didn't know how to speak to his corporate partners, and she constantly demanded more money. Her innocent student persona disappearing the moment she got access to his unlimited black card. She spent $500,000 in a single week on designer bags, her Instagram filled with smug, bragging photos that made the Sinclair Group stock prices dip. At a corporate event in late November, I ran into them. I was wearing a simple, elegant emerald green silk dress, my hair tied back in a classic bun, my skin glowing with health and success. The Vance Atelier had just secured the contract to redesign the interior of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a deal that had placed my name at the top of the design world. I was standing by the champagne fountain, chatting with a wealthy real estate developer, when Anderson walked past. He looked terrible. His face was pale, his eyes surrounded by deep dark circles, his shoulders slightly hunched. Beside him, Vivian was wearing a massive, over-the-top red gown that looked entirely inappropriate for a formal corporate dinner. She was complaining loudly about her shoes hurting, her voice high and annoying. When Anderson saw me, his eyes lit up with a sudden, desperate light of hunger. He took a step toward me, leaving Vivian behind, his voice shaking. Elise. I didn't look at him. I turned to my client, raised my glass and walked toward the other side of the room, my silk train sweeping smoothly over the polished floor, leaving his shadow behind. The crash of the Sinclair Group's stock was swift and silent. Because of the Vance family's withdrawal of their joint venture capital, and the public scandal of Vivian's financial extravagance, the board of directors had begun to lose confidence in Anderson's leadership. He had spent his days and nights trying to salvage his empire, but his mind was no longer sharp. He was exhausted, his home life a constant battlefield of Vivian's demands and his own rising regret. One night, in the Central Park penthouse, Jace tried to hold Vivian's hand. They were sitting on the expensive leather sofa, the rain drumming violently against the glass. He reached out and wrapped his fingers tightly around her palm, hoping to feel that old, wild passion that had once made him throw away his marriage. But the moment their skin met, he felt nothing. Her hand was cold, her fingers stiff, her mind completely focused on the diamond catalog she was browsing on her tablet. Her skin contact no longer transmitted that raw, desperate adoration into his brain. He realized, with a terrifying, bone-deep certainty, that her love was never about him. It was about his money, his status, and the security his name could buy. He had thrown away a woman who loved him for who he was, just to buy a parasitical doll who loved him for what he owned. The winter rain of New York was cold, turning the asphalt of the streets into a dark, shimmering mirror. I was leaving my design studio at 10 p.m., my trench coat pulled tight around my neck, my black umbrella held steady against the wind. The street was empty, the yellow street lamps casting long, dancing shadows across the wet gravel. As I approached my car, a tall, dark figure stepped out from the shadow of the brick building. It was Anderson. He wasn't wearing his custom suit. He was wearing a wet, rumpled trench coat, his hair plastering against his forehead, his face pale and sunken, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He looked like a man who had been wandering the streets for hours in the storm. He stood in front of my car door, his body shaking with the cold. Elise, he whispered, his voice raw, broken, and completely stripped of his pride. Please, just let me talk to you. Just for 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you, Anderson, I said, my hand reaching for the door handle. Move aside. I'm going home. No. He fell to his knees on the rain-slicked pavement, his hands reaching out to grab the hem of my coat, his forehead pressing against my leather boots. Please, Elise. Just let me touch you. Just once. Tell me what you see. In my heart. Is it still her? Or is it you? I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I need to know if there's still a chance. I looked down at the most powerful man in New York, kneeling in the mud at my feet, his hands clutching my shoes like a beggar waiting for scraps. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, and no pain. I don't need to touch you, Anderson, to know what's in your heart, I said, my voice quiet and cool over the sound of the rain. But if you want to see the truth here. I reached out, my fingers wrapping tightly around his wet, trembling wrist. Skin contact. The transmission was instantaneous, but this time, my mind did not project an image of Vivian or me or anyone else. In my mind there was only a vast, empty vacuum. His heart was a black, dead star, a cold, hollow space filled with nothing but the dry, dusty ashes of his own regrets. He had destroyed his own ability to love, his pride and his greed having eaten his soul from the inside out until there was absolutely nothing left. I pulled my hand back, reached into my pocket, and pulled out a wet wipe, carefully wiping my fingers before tossing it into the gutter. You're empty, Anderson, I said, my voice carrying the quiet peace of the winter rain. There is no one in your heart. Not even yourself. You're just a ghost. Anderson stared at his own hand, his face turning entirely gray under the yellow street lamp. He let out a soft, broken sob, his head dropping back into the mud as his hands went limp. No, he wept. No. Elise, please. I climbed into my car, shut the door and locked it. I started the engine, the windshield wipers clearing the rain with a steady, rhythmic swoosh, and drove away into the bright, clean streets of the city, leaving his shadow behind in the dark. The spring in New York arrived with a brilliant, golden clarity. The Vance Atelier had completed the Metropolitan Museum project, the opening gala attended by the country's most respected artists and architects. I stood near the grand entrance, wearing a simple white silk dress, my hair loose around my shoulders, my skin glowing under the warm lights. A handsome, quiet man named Dr. Marcus Thorne, a research scientist from the local university, walked up to me, a glass of champagne in his hand. He had a warm, gentle smile, his eyes filled with a quiet, respectful admiration. "Congratulations on the opening, Elise," he said, his voice deep and warm. "The space is magnificent." "Thank you, Marcus," I smiled. He reached out, his hand gently, tentatively wrapping around my palm to shake. Skin contact. I closed my eyes, letting the sensation from my fingertips transmit his inner world into my brain. In my mind, there was a quiet, sunlit library filled with books and green plants. Near the window sat a woman in a white dress, sketching. It was me. But this time, I didn't pull my hand back. I didn't feel the cold panic or the urge to run away. I opened my eyes, looked into his honest, warm eyes, and squeezed his hand back, letting his warmth fill my palm. The red carpet was behind me, the corporate wars were over, and the man who had proposed to me for an inheritance was gone, leaving only the quiet, beautiful dawn of a life that was finally truly mine. I took a deep, clean breath and walked into the warm light of my future.